The following podcast is recorded and produced by Emerge, a media creators co-op.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Defon Productions podcast. I'm your host, the hardest working nobody in Bitcoin, Don. Today, we're going to have a little bit of a different format to our podcast. It's going to be not so much charts, not so much screen sharing. We're going to have an interview today. I got a guest here that I'm going to introduce you to in a couple of minutes. Very excited for that. Before we get into that, I do want to take a moment to talk a little bit about what today is, what happened yesterday. That, you know, if you can't open up social media right now and not see it, you know, it's anniversary 9/11, 24 years ago. I've shared on this podcast previously on my social medias, like a little bit about, you know, me being in New York for the first time a couple weeks before that. I got a real cool picture with me and my friends with the towers behind us and, you know, just being in my early 20s, experiencing that day and all that stuff and all the emotions. Everybody's got a story for 9/11. So we have that today. And then, you know, what happened yesterday, with Charlie Kirk. What I don't want to do is talk about the politics of that. I don't want to talk about whether I agree, disagree, or any of that. What really I want to share with the audience here is how I feel I was impacted personally by seeing that. I actually shared this with our guest this morning on the phone. I woke up this morning and thought about what happened yesterday. You know, there's been a lot of celebrity deaths I'm 47 years old. I've experienced a lot of athletes, celebrities, all kinds of, you know, people that are public figures that have passed away that people get upset about. And, you know, and you feel bad and there's empathy and sympathy for that. But I've never been moved to like tears for somebody passing away. In all transparency, Charlie's content, I didn't really consume it. I mean, I knew he existed, but I didn't, not to say that I was for or against anything. And again, I'm not passing judgment in either direction. I'm just saying I didn't really consume a lot of his stuff. But I got emotional this morning thinking about, you know, him passing away. Charlie was a guy that was creating content. He was, you know, talking about his passion, which was politics. Whether you agree with or disagree with it, he loved it. He made content. He ascended to the top of the game of content creation for politics. And somebody killed him for that. And I thought about myself and, you know, Bitcoin, you know, if you watch this podcast for the last couple of years, how passionate I am in making this content for people and talking about Bitcoin on a weekly basis. And if you follow me on social media, daily basis, like this is my passion. When I'm in public, people come up to me and talk to me about it. And, you know, I espouse my personal opinions. I've even had people make comments on my posts that are negative and, you know, gone back and forth and stuff like that. And to think about, you know, regardless of why we don't know for sure, but what we do know is his life is lost. And it's because he was out, you know, talking about his passion. And that hit me, you know, it really hit me to see that somebody's life could be taken doing something that they love. You know, and it really sucks. I think this is a time for all of us, especially on 9/11. I mean, we talked about this before we went live. You know, I can remember September 12th, September 13th, 14th, 15th, how united this country was. You know, there was no Republican and Democrat. Everybody was flying the flags in the back of their car. Everybody was beeping the horn, USA, USA. And it's just wild to think that yesterday happened. And I scroll social media and it's like, you would think we're in a civil war in this country with two sides. And I'm not here to say the right or wrong. I'm just saying we have two sides and there's a lot of hate and there's a lot of anger. I think the anger is okay. I think it's okay to be angry about things because that elicits change. But this hate, man, I don't think it's it. I don't think the hate is it. I think it's okay to have disagreements and we should continue to have disagreements and we should continue to talk about our disagreements. But hating somebody because they don't believe what you believe in, or they don't see things the way that you see things, like, in this, I'll take it to this ecosystem, Bitcoiners, and we call them shitcoiners. And if you're not a Bitcoin maxi and you're this, and we fight and we argue, and at the end of the day, like, who gives a shit, right? I mean, you feel one way, I feel another way. We can all still break bread no matter what. Somebody's life should never be taken over somebody feeling differently about you. And even if they say mean things, even if they say mean things about you, they shouldn't die for that. I got this small platform. I don't have hundreds of thousands of viewers, but if I'm impacting one or two people saying this and they hear that, I feel like this is how I can help for that conversation to say that. And I just wanted to take the first couple of minutes of the podcast to share that. Back into the thing that we do here, which is the Bitcoin, the crypto things. Real quick, we'll just go through the markets to update everybody. I'm not going to share the screen. I'll just give you the updates. Right now, Bitcoin is sitting at 114,366. Ethereum at 4,421. Total market cap of Bitcoin is at 2.28 trillion. We're having a little bit of a run today. Woke up this morning in the 113s. It broke 114 when some data was released, and it's kind of kept above that. Total crypto market cap at 3.96 trillion, getting close to that 4 trillion again. Fear and Greed Index is right in the middle at 47. So, we know that this is the time of the year and the cycle, the 4-year cycles, where things will probably start to get crazy one way or another soon. Onto the guest that we got here. We have I'm really excited to have this conversation today. Shout out to Jay Lizardo for helping set this up. I have Tom Lizardo here. Tom, if you want to tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, who you are, what your insights are, and what kind of conversation we'll be having today.
Well, I've been a government and political person for the vast majority of my career. I was a city administrator in Niagara Falls, New York, and as soon as that gig passed, well, I should even probably go back before that, because since you referenced Charlie Kirk and what happened, again, same as you, my politics are not the same as they were 30 years ago, and I'm not taking anybody's side. But before I was the city administrator, in my late 20s, mid to late 20s, what I did for a living was travel to college campuses and talk about conservative politics. Wow. So, I mean, it's very similar, eerily similar.
Hits home.
It does, very much so. And prayers for his family, his wife, and his children. And as you said, I try, when I was in politics, I didn't always do the best job of it, but as I've gotten further away from it and still retain interests in public policy and political economics and things of that nature, I try to tone down the rhetoric as much as possible, and certainly agree with your observations that we have to disagree, because that's how we get better. But we can do it in a way that tries to, at the very least, recognize, I would hope, our common humanity. But I did the political governmental affairs thing for many, many years. After I left the city, I got involved in the campaign of somebody who a lot of crypto enthusiasts will know well. I think when we first talked, you described him as
he's a sound money legend.
He's a sound money legend,
yep.
and the father or grandfather of Bitcoin without necessarily knowing it, which was Dr. Ron Paul. I went down to Texas, worked on his political campaign. He had been a House member, had run for president as a libertarian. I'd known him from my national political experiences, and he was kind enough to hire me to come down and help run his campaign to get back into the House of Representatives, which I did. And then we were successful in that venture. And then after that, he called me into his office and asked if I would be willing to serve as his chief of staff, which I did for about a dozen years in Washington, D.C., and I spent a lot of the time back and forth between Washington and Texas. So I did that. I'm from Niagara Falls, born and raised. My youngest son decided he was going to come back here to Niagara University for college, which brought me back to the Niagara Falls area. I've done some investing in digital assets, crypto, and more in the ecosystem or the adjacent sort of industries, whether it's financial technologies, emerging technologies, data centers. I've gotten involved in that and learned a lot as a layman and an investor. Don't consider myself to be a crypto specialist, but I've really started to notice a lot how there are different ways to fund things that are emerging or starting to hopefully emerge. And in Niagara Falls, we have a mayor who's very committed to a project which includes a downtown sports arena, which, as I understand it, and as some folks who are close to me who are more deeply knowledgeable and invested in the crypto space have talked to me about how this is sort of a repeatedly discussed potential methodology for more adoption, more ways to get crypto used, broader understanding, and as we've discussed, a real way to help grow an ownership economy, which we certainly need more of here in Niagara Falls. So as a result of that, I started to think more and speak more with people I've been working with for a while in different capacities about, is there a lane here where the mayor's vision for Niagara Falls and its future might coalesce and conjoin with these ideas about new methods of stadium funding? Because always, or not always, but frequently the most significant concern that people have with these sorts of projects is, how do you fund it?
How do you fund it? Yeah.
And can it make money, or can it not lose a bunch of money at the very least? And I see it as this is an opportunity where we can at least try to push the envelope so that people who are interested in tokenization, digital assets, fractional ownership, there are different levels at which, even though it's not directly crypto related necessarily, crowdfunding, how all these sorts of newer methods of funding spaces and arenas and activities could be at the very least considered in a real world scenario here in a city where, it's Niagara Falls, which means it's both on the border. So it's a demonstration project that is quintessentially American. The Falls are an American icon.
Yeah, agreed.
But it's also binational and international by nature. People in Canada are going to be paying close attention if we step into this space as a city. And we have visitors from all over the world here every day, and millions every year, who will also, I think, be exposed if we do this in a way that could be done to crypto, to adoption, to all sorts of new uses that could be. I think, you can tokenize everything from the land under the building to the teams, to the tickets, to the apparel, the streaming, the broadcast rights, anything that like the concessions, anything that happens in or around the facility, I think, as I understand it, could benefit from some form and some level of tokenization.
Let me ask you a question, because we've had offline conversations about what you're referencing and how we can tokenize things and give people real ownership. Let me back up just a little bit, because you'll have insight to something that I definitely don't have any insight into. There's a word or words that are thrown around in Washington a lot. And when I hear it, I don't think that the politicians even know what they're talking about when they say this word, but it goes to what we're talking about. And I think we have to start here to do the things that we want to do with those ideas that we have. wealth redistribution. That's a word that's tossed around a lot in Washington. Okay. And when politicians say that, I think, because I would like to see the good in people instead of the bad, especially after, what we experienced yesterday. I think there's decent intentions when that's said, because there are people in this country, in this world, that have way more money than they'll ever need, while also recognizing that there's a large segment of the population that's really struggling. So somebody with a good heart, a good mind would say, hey, all these people have all this money here. All these people here don't have a lot of money. There's way more of this than that. Let's redistribute some of that. In theory, makes sense, except it doesn't, because you can't redistribute money to people that don't understand how to manage that money, because case in point, we tried that in 2020. We redistributed wealth in 2020 in the form of stimulus, multiple stimulus. And Rich can attest to this, because I talked about this a couple podcasts ago. One of the richest people in the world right now, and I always mess up his name. I know his last name is Arnault, I think, and I forget the first name. He rocketed up to second richest man in the world during the COVID stimulus package of 18 months of money we sent out. Why, you might ask? Because he owns 53 different luxury brands. So you sent money to financially illiterate people who could definitely use the money because they're struggling, right? And they spent that money in ways that don't make a lot of sense. And the money still went back to the people that have all the money. So when you redistribute the wealth to the people that don't understand what to do with the money, it still goes back to these. And it's not, and again, it's how is it their fault now when you took it and put it here, there, and they still give it back, right? So when we talk about the ownership piece, which we've talked about offline, which I really think is a good idea. And I think it would, if people really understood the power of that, it would be a great sell. I think what we need to do is have, and we talked about this too, some real education in our school systems. And I'm sorry, Rich, I know that you're 30-year teacher, and you feel the same way that I feel.
I feel the same way.
We really dropped the ball in our education system of not teaching students proper financial literacy, because then they become adults that don't have good financial literacy, and then it generationally continues. But the roadblocks that we're seeing, because we're talking offline, is because we're dealing with people that they might have good jobs, they might even have a decent net worth, but they don't have proper financial literacy. So when you have these conversations, and I think you'll know this way better than I would. I think Congress is full of people without financial literacy. Even the ones that might have multi-millions, Nancy Pelosi, of net worth because of all the trading that they do with all the inside, I still think they don't properly understand finance, because you would never say we need to redistribute, and Bernie Sanders, they would never say these things if they truly understood. You have to go to the beginning root of the problem.
Well, boy, I mean, I could go in several directions with that. One of the interesting things is you're using language that in our previous discussions we haven't used, but I want you to know it echoes language I've been using for years, if not decades.
I got the vibe.
Because with wealth distribution, right, redistributing wealth and redistributing, and another way I like to say it is redistributing capital.
Yes.
But you're exactly right. It's education and literacy, right? Because the capital starts with not things external to you, right? Wealth is not primarily an external thing. Mm-hmm. It may have external displays, but internally, it's your capacity to know and understand, to learn, to think, to adapt, to do things differently. If you lose your job, to change your job, start a new business, become an entrepreneur. As you do that, that's real capital and wealth redistribution. And that's based exactly on what you're suggesting, which is education and literacy. And I'll say two things related to that. One is when you talk about Capitol Hill. When I was on Capitol Hill, Dr. Paul had something called the Liberty Caucus. And there were 30 or 40 loosely affiliated members. And one member was doing and saying some things that were very close to what Dr. Paul was saying. They were agreeing on a lot of things about the economy and foreign entanglements and how those interplayed with each other. And the campaign manager for this member sat down and had lunch with me, and he said, look, there's no disagreement here. The problem I'm having is my boss, my member, just doesn't understand it the way your boss, your member does. Your boss can speak on these things. I mean, I saw Dr. Paul sit in his office over and over again and study, money velocity.
What a place to be. God.
There's no one else up there who is as well versed.
He's the only one that's ever made sense talking about finance
right
in government.
Right. He understood literally so much more than others. And, I mean, I'm not an anti-democratic person, but, you elect people primarily based on popularity and things of that nature.
And lobbying.
And he just had the knowledge and the education and the understanding about some of these economic matters that was far beyond those of some of his colleagues. So you're right about the lack of financial literacy in some regard there. The other thing I want to say is, as I started to get involved with this process that we're talking about here locally and looking not exclusively, but primarily at, okay, so the mayor of Niagara Falls has this vision, and these folks who are in the digital asset community have a complementary vision if we can get them to vision together. One of the things that became obvious to me and some of the folks I was working with is that we need to do some of this education.
100%.
So we've started a website, NiagaraAdvocate.com, and it's with 2 A's. It's all one word, NiagaraAdvocate.com.
We'll put that in the description of the video when this interview's over.
Thank you so much. But it's going to be, as I say, an advocate for Niagara, right? And on both sides of our border, here in Niagara Falls, New York, where most of us are from, but not just an advocate as far as what's happening in town, although certainly some of that, not just an advocate as why you should come and visit Niagara as a tourist, although certainly some of that, but also some of these financial literacy and financial education things that don't get anywhere near enough sort of play in the public media, the public realm, the public consumption, unless you're looking for places like what you're doing. People who are looking for what you're doing will find you and others like you. But a lot of people don't. I mean, I have sat down, I will tell you, in the last 3 months, I've had discussions with people I work with about how Social Security looks at your present year income, where the person didn't really understand it, about offers in compromise with the Internal Revenue Service. People don't even know what that is. They get a bill and they say, oh my goodness. And about things like, well, if you just have a little bit of money sitting in a bank doing nothing for you, why don't you invest in U.S. Treasuries? You can do this for $100 for 4 weeks and you'll make something.
Not 0.01%.
Right. Yeah. Right. And of course, beyond that, we get into this whole emerging economy of you can work at Twin Fair, and with the idea, or Twin Fair, that's an old one. You can work at you can work
We're
at
aging ourselves.
Right. That's right. You can work at Target and own a part of Walmart.
Yes.
Right. With even now with things like Robinhood Securities, right, where no very low barrier to entry, right, with things like digital assets where you can own cryptocurrencies, and you're an owner and you're somebody who has a stake.
You get a statement to vote for companies that you own shares in, like you did if you had it on Charles Schwab. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Yeah. So all these things are out there. And you're 100% right. This is wealth distribution in the true sense for the long term. It's capital redistribution in the true sense for the long term. And it's the method of emerging an out of people who are not now in the ownership class, an emerging entire ownership class. So yeah, I 100% with you.
Me and you are lifelong residents of Niagara Falls, and we both want to see what's best for the city. The statistics are that I always, it changes, but it's close to half, maybe more, are on some sort of government assistance some sort of way in the city of Niagara Falls of a population of anywhere between 45 and 55,000 people. So when you're trying to bring prosperity to a place where things look so bleak, again, I go back to what I said about 15 minutes ago. We have to start educating people. I had a conversation with my mentor in my traditional finance role where we talked about like generational poverty is a term that communities that are experienced that really understand, right? What they don't understand, but they like the sound of, is generational wealth. They know that that's the opposite of generational poverty. They know generational poverty is bad. So generational wealth, because wealth represents money, must be a good thing. But they don't have the playbook on how to achieve that. So when we talk about this idea of, going back to the mayor, going back to this facility and seeing that as a beautiful opportunity to introduce digital assets into the city of Niagara Falls, while also unintended consequence, bringing us to the forefront of that, industry. At the end of the day, me and you are Niagara Falls residents, and we want what's best for the city. We want what's best for the people. For all that stuff to merge, for the mayor to be able to sell that idea, he's got to sell to the public.
Right.
So there has to be a win, not just for him,
right?
Because at the end of the day, he's still a representative of the people. Yes. The people have to win, and the idea that we've talked about is that digital ownership, piecing those things type out there. But we have to, and I love the idea of the website. We have to get people, the everyday, regular working people that probably me and you loosely know, don't even realize we know because the city's only so big. We can throw out last names and we would know.
Right.
We have to start teaching people what money is, because people work 40 or 50 hours a week, 30 or 40 years of their life, and they don't know what money is. Dr. Paul, sound money, understood it. I get goosebumps when I hear him say, I'm the Fed. Like, it's like the central bank just printing money to infinity, and it was bad. And it in his day, it was bad. It's 10 times worse now since post GFC. And I tell people this all the time: like, people have to get out of the mindset of the old economy that existed before 2008.
Right.
That economy doesn't exist. We've had 4 presidential terms: Obama, Trump. It was Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump. 4 administration terms where we've had multiple equity all-time highs throughout all of those terms.
Correct.
I was trying to think of another 4-year stretch of presidents where we've had that, and I couldn't come up with that.
Right.
That's not normal.
Right.
We don't have business cycles anymore. We don't have the ebbs and flows.
Right.
We had a slight hiccup in 2019 when we were trying to play with the rates again, Fed messing shit up again. We had a slight little hiccup there. Then 2020 comes along and we flood everything in. Interest rates, inflation goes up. So 2022 we had that little bear market of 8 months.
Right.
And then we've been rocking it off again ever since then, while inflation's going up, while the income gap is getting wider, these people getting richer, these people getting poorer, and people are scrambling because, and I think I've shared this example with you. I've definitely shared it on the podcast. We've talked about, I talked about this with my dad 2 weeks ago. You buy a house in 1980 for $30,000.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
You buy $50,000. We'll just say $50,000. You buy a house for $50,000 in Niagara Falls in 1980.
Right.
And you might have been making $20,000.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That $50,000 house now is probably $300,000.
Yes, it is.
That $20,000 salary is maybe $50,000 now.
Right.
For that same job.
Right.
So the house has gone up 6x.
Right.
The salary's gone up maybe 2.5x.
Right.
That's just housing. Everything else is done the same. So wages are not keeping up because our money's not sound. Dr. Paul would run circles around me talking about that. But the fact that people don't understand that the dollars in your pocket are not real. Money is an illusion. And getting people to understand, you're trying to acquire, and you understand this, you're trying to acquire assets that outpace the eroding buying power of the dollar denominator that you're denominating things through. People all the time are Bitcoin goes up, Bitcoin goes up. Bitcoin doesn't do anything. The value of the dollar goes up and down.
Right.
Real estate, that $50,000 house, granted, with technology, it'll be a little bit better, but the structure's the same. Yeah. Nothing's really changed.
Right.
the dollar's worth less, not the house being worth more. Right. And that's a simple concept that people don't understand. And again, you thought they put their money in the bank and they just let it sit there, get nothing. These are the types of conversations that when you have with people and you educate them, that they'll start to buy into this digital asset conversation. It's like, oh my God, when you look and you're like, I have no shot in this system. It's against, I'm not Elon Musk. I'm not Donald Trump. I'm not whoever you want to say. I'm not going to be that. I'm just this guy over here trying to save a little bit. Maybe I'm putting in a 401k. Maybe I got a little bit on Charles Schwab. I'm not going to make it. What is my opportunity? That's why I created this platform here to talk about Bitcoin. But, and I don't know if I told you this, but I definitely shared in the pod, my introduction to Bitcoin was through gold and silver.
Right.
Was through consuming Ron Paul content.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Listening to him and be like, oh my God, that's sound money. And I had gold and silver because I'm like, I don't want dollars. I want gold and silver.
Right.
And then this great, creation comes along, which we said, technology. It advances things that are better, gold 2.0. And then here we are.
Well, these are some of the things that are hopeful, right? Because your history is correct. But now you've got this emerging alternative, which really has come from a lot of different sorts of direct stimuli. But they really go back to the fact that lifestyles are diminished. People are not doing as well as they once were. People are not feeling that they're going to do well in the future, and they're looking for alternative ways. Some of those are pure, raw economic drivers. Like you said, the fact that your house inflation, your capacity to buy a house is far diminished with regard to your salary.
Pricing out a whole generation.
If you're just making a salary, all these facts, and of course, there's still, I think, some moral impetus too, right? People don't want to continue to bail out banks, and when they get done bailing out the bank, what they don't want to do,
nor should they. I agree.
Right,
yeah.
And then what they don't want to do is, if you have to bail out a bank, they don't want the executives to take large pay increases and give themselves bonuses and
Jamie
fly.
Dimon.
I mean, I don't like to point. I really don't.
I do. I don't care.
I try to keep it. I do try to keep it down a little bit. But these things are. I think they're real, and they're real. And a lot of people, just because they don't have, like you say, that education or information base, they just have this uneasy feeling. And I've talked even very recently with some people in the political world about, my constituents are mad and they don't even know why they're mad. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I understand that. And, I believe people in politics largely try to do what the right thing is, and they're trying to feel their way through life the way the rest of us are. Perhaps I'm naive after all my years in it. I don't think I am. But if they don't have that knowledge and information basis themselves, and they are looking around, and it's terribly frustrating because you can't figure out why people are frustrated. Part of it, I'm convinced, is this. And as I said, just people I work with who are, they're doing okay. They make decent money compared to some other folks who are just barely scraping by. But they're sitting their money in a savings account making 0.000 or 0.001, and they don't know where to invest. They don't know how to invest. When I say to them, well, have you ever been in Treasury bill? Do you know anything about it? What's a Treasury bill? What are you talking about? Yeah. And that's right. I mean,
unless you're in the financial world, you don't even know what that is.
Right. It's a pretty simple, but it's also a pretty simple,
basic
concept.
Because we understand it, but to the basic person, does Bank of America have that?
Right. Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. And it's simple, and it is because of some of the things. Like even the Treasury is sort of loosely defined digital asset now, right? Because I can go online, I can purchase it, I can do it with all sorts of different ways and means where I never have to touch anything physical.
I think, honestly, and I could be wrong, but I think stable coins are going to be, I hesitate to say replace, but I think it's possible will replace T-bills, because the fact that well, again, you got an administration in it's like you have night and day between Biden and Trump. So, I mean, you could have another one come in and just think differently. So it doesn't set it in stone. But the fact that they've gone so hard with stable coins, the Genius Act, and they really made and Howard Lutnick, if you know anything about Howard Lutnick, ironically, 9/11 is a big story with him for that. But he's got a big piece of Tether stablecoin, and him pushing that. And I think the stable coins provide liquidity to the entire market, which means, and again, stable coins, for people that don't know, you should if you watch this podcast, they're pegged 1-to-1 to the dollar. So if you own a stable coin, you're not going to make money in the stable coin. But the stable coins provide liquidity for all the other tokens. So if you inject liquidity into the stable coins, then you're using the liquidity from the stable coins to go into Bitcoin, to go into Ether, to go into all the other assets, so more money comes in. Right. So I think they're entrywaying that. And I heard on a Spaces, I listen to Spaces literally every single day. And I heard on a Spaces yesterday that apparently this is brand new information, and I didn't get a chance to look it up. So if I'm a little bit wrong, you can tell me in the comments if somebody's watching. There's one stable coin that exists right now that you can actually get yield on. And it's called Yield. YLD, I think, is the ticker of the stable coin, but there's only one that you can legally get yield on. They snuck it in somehow in the Genius Act, and it's weird because there's all these other ones that have existed much longer, but you can actually get yield on that one. I don't know if it's a test net to see how that is going to perform and what that does before they go ballistic on everything else. But, and I think that's a good thing, because stable coins will probably be an easier entry point for people than T-bills. And how do you it'll be so much easier for them to get access to that, to put capital.
It's funny you go to stablecoin, because I'm not sure if we've discussed this offline at all, but my original thought with regard to digital assets in the city of Niagara Falls was prompted by my stumbling into, through research, the Wyoming stablecoin.
Miami's got one too. We did talk about this, because I told you Miami's.
That's right. So my first thought was, and it's just become a less pressing thought, but it's not by any means gone away, is that it would be really interesting, again, particularly because we're on a border, we draw people from all over the world. It would be particularly interesting for the city of Niagara Falls to issue a local stablecoin. And I think it could and can be done. I will say this. What's become obvious to me is, because of the priorities of the local government and local economic development, immediate priorities, I think that if we can get some adoption, tokenization with regard to the stadium process, that would provide evidence, proof of concept, and would provide it's information, right? Like you said, the mayor, I've spoken with him about it, and he's very open-minded. He hasn't promised me anything. I've not asked him to promise me anything, but he's very open-minded about, hey, yeah, I mean, if this helps the people of the city of Niagara Falls, count me in. Let's explore it. Help me explore it. I don't know where that winds up, but if it winds up in some method of adoption for a single-use project like a stadium, it's either going to be well-regarded and well-received or not, right? And I'm assuming that it's going to be well-regarded and well-received because I believe it just makes sense. That being the case, if I'm right, then that, to me, would promote and prompt me to be able to go to the mayor and say, if this is working here for this project, so could we do something more general?
What we're proposing, because we kind of beat around it a little bit, I'll just throw it out there, kind of like what we talked about. The idea that me and you have talked about offline is taking a property, in this case, that complex that the city wants to build. They've already, prior to this, that's already been something that they wanted to do, and using a token, which we talked about. The Niagara Falls would be perfect name for a token, and piece off ownership of this property digitally. And again, the amount that we do is almost irrelevant. Even a little piece, even if it's a symbolic piece, it's actually irrelevant. 5%, 10%, whatever it is. But offering that to the community in a way where actual citizens were the only ones that had access. And again, there's a lot of legwork and a lot of like plumbing that would need to be done to do that. It sounds much easier. It's going to be difficult, but anything that's going to be like a new idea is difficult. But taking that property, 100% ownership of the property, it's got to get funded some way.
Right.
But offsetting some of that funding, not by saying, hey, we're going to take taxpayer money.
Right.
No, John Smith that lives on 77th Street, you want to buy $100 of Niagara Falls token, you will own a percentage of this building. You will get something to say you have that ownership. You can trade that ownership. You can sell that ownership. It may go up in value. It may go down in value, but you have a piece of that building. It does two things. Number one, it sells to the community that, we're not just going to fund this with, you actually are able to have a piece of this. You own this.
That's right.
You own this property. So then when people come in and patronize this facility, you're almost like incentivizing people to say, hey, don't throw that shit on the floor. Don't vandalize the building. Can we make sure that the bathrooms are clean? It gives you a sense of ownership of something and say, hey, I own a piece of the building downtown in Niagara Falls. And you might be a guy that works a minimum wage job at whatever spot.
That's right.
But you're like, that's mine. I have a piece of that. The same way that somebody could say, I own 10 shares of Apple and I got a piece of Apple. And say, do you really own Apple? You got a couple of shares, but I mean, you feel good about that.
Right.
You have ownership of that. And I think doing that in a city like Niagara Falls, where people are so impoverished, where people don't have a lot, but to say, hey, the city's going to build something else, they're going to spend a lot of money. No, we're going to spend some money here, but we're going to give you an opportunity to have some ownership in this and a token that may go up or may get on in value. And it's almost irrelevant because you'll have ownership of something and you'll learn about equity and you'll learn about like what that is. And we can teach people. You can have a rollout like before we even do it of like, hey, we're going to do this thing. This is what wealth is. This is what financial literacy. This is an asset. This is sound money. These are things that you do. Build up your balance sheet. Like all these conversations that come from it. And again, it could fall completely on its face at the end, but all the things that would happen before it did would still be a win, in my opinion. Would still be a win for the mayor, for the city, for the people. I don't see a scenario where it's a losing scenario, except by saying, no, we can't do that. We're not even going to think about it.
Well, and that's right. And that's what we're going to face, right? I mean, there's two things. One is that one local politician, and I don't want to get into politics either. I really don't.
Sure.
I just have no use for
Not
it
a good
anymore.
day for it anyway.
Said something about, well, this new building isn't going to be a silver bullet, which the mayor has never used that phrase. He's talked about things that we were talking about 30 years ago when I was in city government. He's talked about what the benefits are. He hasn't been, I don't think he's been pie in the sky at all. But what I did say to him is, while a building may not be a silver bullet,
ideology would be.
The change in an ownership account, if you do this in a way that presents people with the idea that they're owners in this city, and they don't even just have to be from the city, right? People from outside the city can participate as well. If that's what they want to do, there are ways to structure, as I understand it, there are ways it could be structured to present both the domestic ownership economy and to have capital inflow. If you can do that, that changes fundamentally the city, the future, in a way that just a building doesn't. It's so much more than just a building.
It provides hope, which the city's been lacking for 50 years since urban renewal. I mean, again, like I don't say, we don't say all this like it's like snap our fingers and it's just going to be this great thing that's going to happen. In a city like Niagara Falls, for those of you that may have visited, if you're watching this from somewhere else, like there's like two cities. You got the American side, you have the Canadian side. When you come into the city of Niagara Falls, you see in the distance what looks like a city. And when you get to our downtown, the Niagara Falls, U.S. downtown, you realize the city that you're seeing is in another country. It's the Niagara Falls city. They have a skyline.
Yeah.
They have hotels. They have multiple casinos. They have a Clifton Hill that's almost like a Fremont Street type thing. And we have none of that on this side. And I'm not going to get into why they have all that over there or what all that is. But what I'm going to say is we've made a couple little attempts. And I'll say little attempts because they haven't really been well thought out or even nobody's had the balls to really just say, you know what, I'm going to just go all in. And if I get thrown out of office for this, I'm just going to, nobody's had the balls to really say, I'm going to do something revolutionary. If it works, it's going to be great for the city. If not, the next guy can come in and try. And I'm not saying that Restaino is or isn't doing those things. I don't want to throw that on him per se. But we've just had administration after administration after administration come in, promise a lot, underdeliver, in the city. And it's like we have it's not like we're in like the middle of nowhere where it's like, oh, well, we're just going to be this. It's like we literally stare every single day across the street at a nicer city.
Like
and we look over here and we're like, what in the fuck are we doing? What's happening?
I do want to jump in.
Please do.
I kind of wanted to let it go a little bit. So two things that come to mind. Again, I was in education, and the first thing I'll say about education, one of the things that I talked about significantly when we're building the new Niagara Falls High School was what was going to be different about our building. And I'm not going to there were a lot of regulations, which New York State regulations education, which made it difficult to do some of the things. Education should be local, but it's very much run by state and federal government. And it stops us from doing some things we want to do. So I've always said we needed to be teaching economic literacy. It's great that I taught algebra for 10 years before I got into technology. But like I use the algebra, but the kids could benefit from knowing what a credit card debt is and why not to take a predatory student loan and all the kinds of things that we don't teach kids. The other thing I want to talk about is these are similar conversations that everybody was having in the 90s when we realized we had two public high schools that were both falling apart for different reasons. And the superintendent at the time said, we need to try something revolutionary. And everybody's like, well, the school taxes never went up when they built that $80 million Niagara Falls High School. The superintendent at the time, Carmen Grano, found a way to fund it. The other thing that worked really well is because it's not in the middle of nowhere. It's Niagara Falls High School. Even if you've never been to Niagara Falls, people know what Niagara Falls is. So it was a brand name. And a lot of companies, Honeywell and other companies, wanted to be part of it. The first 2-3 years when we opened that school, people from all over the country, school districts, municipalities, came to ask questions how we did it. And that idea of a public-private partnership to build that building spread throughout the country. And it was done in many, many places. But guys like Carmen Grano, George Maziarz, the city, the state allowed us to do some things that were different or the place never would have been built. And
it's a great example.
I think that concept, it's not the same concept, but this idea of Niagara Falls taking a chance, and you can decide whether building that school was a success or not. But the fact is it's there and it exists and it has provided opportunities for kids. The ownership of the kids in those early years, because they saw that they had this beautiful building and they got things that they were poor kids that usually the rich districts got stuff like that. We got those kids, those poor kids with nothing who were on public assistance got something nice. And I think that was very important in those first 10 years. I do think also a comparison that I think should be mentioned is why the Green Bay Packers, a city of 100,000, owns an NFL team.
We've talked about that offline.
And they don't get profits from it. They understand the reason they own the Green Bay Packers is so it reinvests in the community. It's always a reinvestment into the community, and it spreads around. So yes, it's the Green Bay Packers. It's Lambeau Field, but it's also everything around it. And that money that just keeps coming back, it's an investment. We need to try in the city of Niagara Falls some sort of investment in a public-private partnership. And maybe it is an arena. And I think because we are brand name, and the other nation that you haven't mentioned, there's one across the border. There's also a nation across the street, the Seneca Nation. And they have expressed interest in being partner in this as well because they do not have a place for some of the things they like to do. They have a ballroom.
And they have something that's very valuable.
Yes. They like
money.
They want to do shows, and they have a lot of money coming in. So that's my outside perspective, my little bit of knowledge of our community. I love this idea that I could buy a piece of that building.
I think he made a really good point of the brand recognition,
Yeah.
Which is probably partly why the other side had the success that they had
That's right.
so fast and quickly. Definitely a part of that. And I think, you got a former teacher and three knuckleheads in a room, and we're thinking of these types of things. And what frustrates me as somebody who's been in this area my entire life is the people that, and you're going to hate when I say this, I don't vote. I haven't voted since 2008. Since the financial crisis, I said I'm all set. And yesterday's another reason why I'm just going to. But anyways, people get voted into power to serve the people. And I see it in my own city. I don't feel like people are being served. And on a grander scale, I feel the same with government as well. But here in the city that like we can impact locally, I just don't. I'm very underwhelmed by. And I can say Republican, I can say Democrat, because we've had Republican-led city council, we've had Democrat mayors, and vice versa, and nobody's done shit. So you can't say, oh, it's the Democrats, or oh, it's the Republicans, or no, you all suck. None of you guys are doing anything. Nothing innovative.
I'm not going to strongly disagree with you. I'm only going to say that's one of the. I mean, I've not been in the center of many political discussions recently, and one of the reasons that I've, to be honest with you, somewhat reluctantly stepped into this discussion is because the current mayor has shown again and again at some political risk and with quite a lot of both political and personal invective being tossed his way, that he's willing to fight for this project. And that one of the things I've suggested to him is that I think the fact, I mean, you and I know that two of the criticisms that would come from a lot of people, including people who might be interested in getting involved with the project we're discussing, is one is, well, politicians change their mind every day. And the other is, well, when the big banks get involved and you're threatening them, how much is this going to survive? The land that's under consideration has been owned by a very large New York City banker for a very long time with very little activity. And he's thrown a lot of money at the mayor to try to get him out of office. He's had a lot of people dispatched to say over the top thing when you talk about trying to turn the volume down. And I've told the mayor directly, I believe that those things could inure to the benefit of people who really start to look at this from the DeFi community.
Let me ask you a question, because I'm not positive. I think I know, but I'm not positive. Now, there's a relevant reason why I'm asking the question.
Sure.
Rustino is Democrat.
He's a Democrat who is, I should say this because I think I understand sort of the hint of the question.
Okay.
He's a Democrat, but he's been always endorsed. When he won the mayoralty originally, he was endorsed by both the conservative and the libertarian parties.
Okay.
So he is a Democrat.
Okay.
I'm not affiliated with any party at the moment, so I don't. When people say, "Oh, he's not really a Democrat," I don't agree with that.
Not that part isn't relevant. The only reason why I ask is because something that's actually in his favor is the fact that he's on the side where he would not have to be worrying about the other side, because the other side right now in the political climate we're in now, Republicans are like really embracing crypto.
Right.
Like hardcore.
Right.
So typically in politics, Republicans have an idea. They say the sun is red, and they say, no, it's not. It's gray.
Right.
And this guys will say that, morning starts in the AM. No, morning starts in the PM. Whatever you say, it's the opposite. In this case, if he's embracing something pro-crypto as a Democrat,
Right.
it puts the Republicans in a rough spot, especially MAGA Republicans, because the MAGA Republicans are definitely pro crypto. They can't say it's a bad idea because their leader is literally making legislation to embrace that technology. So it kind of puts them at the carpet to say, hey, what's good for the goose, why isn't it good for the gander in our city here? So the political fallout might come from his side if he's Democrat, potentially. But if he's a leader, you do whatever you want. You really only have to worry about the opposition, which is the other side, who embrace that.
That's right. I can't disagree with anything you just said. I think I mentioned to you that when I went down to Washington last week, I have an old dear friend who is now the White House counsel.
Okay.
He's President Trump's top government lawyer.
Oh, wow.
So
probably got great stories that you can't share.
I mean, we do. We shared them with each other. We reminded each other of our 30s and the stuff we did. But you know, I didn't go deep into detail with him about what we're talking now. Mm-hmm. But I did talk with him about digital assets and Niagara Falls project and something I was trying to put together. You know, and he said to me, you know, look, we believe that putting together the regulatory regime like the Genius Act will be a path to adoption. He probably didn't use those exact words because he's probably not as quite as familiar with them as I am. But you know, for use, right? That we believe these currencies can be a real asset class that makes real sense and can be something that takes on other aspects of currency, including tradability. And that's why we're trying to get this in place. So this is a Republican, MAGA Republican,
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you're right. There are bipartisan, nonpartisan, external reasons why all this can happen now. And when branding was mentioned a moment ago, I can tell you I've reached out not as deeply as I hope to into primarily through the policy community in Washington, into some of the crypto and DeFi circles. And I've got so far very preliminary, but nothing other than positive responses. Perhaps some of my personal background with Congressman Paul helps to do that as well.
Gives you street cred.
It does. It gives me street cred, but the name Niagara Falls gives me a lot of street cred too. It's not, you know, what do they used to say? Podunk,
yeah.
Right? It's not that. So there's a brand there and there's a possibility there, and you're absolutely right. I don't know where this will all go, and I don't know how much of a outcome will be the one that I hope it is. But like I said, I've talked with the mayor. I've elicited no promises. He's given me no promises. But I can tell through the discussions that if the right people get in the room and present things in a way that makes sense for the city of Niagara Falls, that he can go forward with, he will. That I believe.
Yeah. I mean, I know I shared this with you offline, but any way that I can assist, offline, online, if the mayor ever wants to come on this podcast and have a discussion and talk about it, if things actually progress,
right?
Open platform,
right?
If you need any help discussing anything needed for this, throw my hat in the ring to
you
assist.
Can count on me buzzing around you quite a bit then in the future because it's something I believe in, and I'm not a young guy anymore. It's sort of part of what I perceive as potentially a part of a lasting legacy, because when I was the city administrator, that piece of land was at question, and we're 30 years later, and that piece of land is at question, and I feel like, at least in part, sort of the mayor's current plan is a change, but the closest continuation to the plan that my boss, the mayor, presented 30 years ago that I've seen presented by anybody else. So I'd like to hope to help with it. And I think this is probably, if I can, the best way is to have people like you and people from the digital asset community give Niagara Falls a good look and give this project a good look.
I know you got to be somewhere, so we'll wrap up soon. I'll end with one last question. If, with all of your experience in politics, with the political climate that we have now, if you could speak to the 20-something political activist or political passion person that's feeling however they're feeling on either side,
Right.
what would you say if you had like a minute or two to tell them, with all your experience, what the next 20 or 30 years would be if you just...
I put 20 good, solid years, roughly speaking, maybe a little more than that, 25 good, solid years into politics. I saw the good, the bad, and the ugly, the nasty, the beautiful, and the profane. I think it's worthwhile. I left it. I've still stayed on the outskirts of it a little bit. But, if you have beliefs, whatever those beliefs are, don't be deterred from advocating. Don't expect that it's a perfect world in politics any more than it is in business or anywhere else. But stay involved, stay active, engage, get involved in your community, vote. You do the things that you don't have to be loud. The vote, to me, voting is just, I go in for many years. I've gone in and nobody's had any idea who I voted for. And to be honest with you, I'd go in and I'd try to find one Democrat and one Republican and one conservative and I'd literally try to cast a vote across as many different lines as I could, not just to do it, but because I thought there were good people. And I said, well, this one's a Democrat. I like them. This one's a conservative. I like them. So I think that the temperature should be turned down. I try to do that now. Like I said, when I was in it, I was pretty controversial sometimes and pretty confrontational sometimes. But I think you can do it and try to turn it down a little bit, recognize the humanity in the other person, but get involved and get active and advocate for the things you believe, whether it's the digital economy or, whichever political party or ideology or philosophy you want to see advanced. Do it.
Yeah. I mean, to just land the plane there, I hope that whatever people have passions for, that doesn't stop them from pursuing those passions. And again, it doesn't have to be politics. And be like, I was affected by just doing a Bitcoin podcast with 40 people, 40 whatever is watching right now. Just do it. Like, don't let that, like, whoever did this or whatever, not even the person, the ideology behind that wins if you just give up.
Right.
And we're not, this country on 9/11 with this 24-year anniversary, we're better than that. That's not what we're about. The ideology of this country is that, we get up from every knockdown and we keep fighting.
That's right.
Not necessarily physically.
Right.
So,
right. Amen.
Yeah, we can kind of wrap things up. Thank you. Much appreciate your time. I know your time is valuable for coming in, having this conversation. I think it was important. Feel free to use this podcast to show someone if you want, the back and forth that we had to help talk. Like, it's public. I am, now I can say that more than we, the only that I know of live stream Bitcoin and crypto podcast in the Western New York area. Definitely the only one in Niagara Falls.
Right.
So anything that's going on, open invitation on this podcast. If you want to come back, if you want to bring somebody on, if you want to continue the conversation, use this as a platform, whatever. Everything is out there
Thank you so
that.
much. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, man. That. My pleasure. To the viewers, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, all that, cool stuff. And as always, as we always end the podcast, 103 times now, don't trust, verify. Thank you. Peace. Thanks, man.
Sure. Thank you. Really